But I brought this out and started doing some clucks and some yelps on it. Like did like 2 like short yelp sequences. And when I did that, the scratching stopped. And 30 seconds later, I see a red and white head. There's a big down tree in front of me, and it going right to left in front of me at probably 70 yards. I see this big big white and red head kind of pop up, and then it goes back down, and I see a full tail fan come up.
Oh.
On that tree. I'm like, oh, bull. I'm like, dude, no. I'm like, there ain't no way this is about to happen. I'm like, dude, first morning in Florida. Are you kidding me?
All right, everybody, we got a bunch of ground to cover today. We just got back from South Florida. We're going to talk a little bit about turkey calling, and one thing in particular that I want to talk about when it comes to turkey calling is how you really don't have to be a great caller, and I think some of our recent interviews have kind of underscored that a little bit. But Jacob, how are you?
I'm doing good. I love how you do that because I'm the one doing the calling demo, so you're throwing shade my way. I appreciate that.
I used you as an example for Sam and Blakely when I was teaching them how to use the pot call and everything. I was like I'm not trying to throw shade or anything, but I'm like, Jacob's not like a great caller. Like, you ain't gonna go to any competition.
No.
But you killed a fire out of some turkeys last year. That's all that matters. The only judge that matters, right?
Should have killed one in Florida. We're gonna talk about that.
Should have killed one in Florida. I'm trying to think of any housekeeping we got. We haven't done a Q&A in a little while. Y'all write in some Q&As if you got those. There's a submission form on our website where you can go and submit a video Q&A. We have gotten a couple written Q&As over the last couple weeks, but we're trying to keep it to the video ones for now. So if you've got a written Q&A that you might have written in, I would maybe go back and redo it as a video Q&A.
What is the Q&A, by the way?
I mean, it's a Q&A.
Write in your questions. We'll answer some of these Thursday episodes.
I don't know what you're going for.
That's simple. So especially if you have questions going into turkey season this year, especially if your state's not open quite yet, or maybe you've run into situations so far turkey hunting, and the handful of states are already open, write those questions in, and we'll either try to get them answered ourselves or try to get one of our good buddies and experts on the podcast to kind of talk about it.
So we just got back from South Florida. We've been talking about going on this hunt for a little while now. And basically we were just going down to hunt and do some interviews. So we were able to knock out some really good interviews. One of the interviews you're actually going to hear this coming Monday. So I'm not going to spoil that, but it's with an awesome guest. We talk a lot about locator calls. And the other interview is actually with a deer guy, so you're not going to hear that one for a little while. But we were able to knock that out. Pretty excited actually to put out the deer episode that we recorded down there. It was wild. It was crazy. Hunting those swamps down there.
Definition of Florida man. I mean, just stuff I would never even imagine doing. And again, dude kills really big deer. And I told our buddy Chris Leppert what he classified as a trophy deer in Florida, and the number will surprise you. So
yes.
It is. When he said it, I'm like, "Are you really like?" Really? He's like, yeah. He's like, that's a trophy deer. What we call a trophy deer down here. It's a lot higher than you think it is.
Yeah. So that was a super fun interview. That one will be coming out probably early summer. I would say, whenever we switch back to deer content, which will probably be in May at some point. So we were able to do those, and then we're like, well, if we're gonna go do some interviews down there, let's go ahead and turkey hunt. And our friends Sam and Blakely wanted to turkey hunt as well, which we got to get them on here at some point in the near future. Right now, we just can't do it because we don't have the setup yet, but we'll have it soon, so we'll have them on the podcast. But they're newer turkey hunters, and Blakely specifically has blood in her eyes, as Eddie Salter would say, for Osceola turkey. So we're going to talk about that a little bit. By the way, one thing I wanted to mention is over the last couple of weeks, we've had Preston Pittman on. Mm-hmm. We've had Eddie Salter. We've had Bob Walker, and we did a throwback episode with Dave Owens of Pinotti Project. And in all those episodes, we talk a little bit about calling. And we got some calling demonstrations, especially from Eddie. People have been really enjoying those clips on YouTube. and commenting on them a whole bunch. And Eddie is a really good turkey caller. Actually, all of those guys are really, really, really good turkey callers. And this is going to kind of tie in with some of the things that happened on our Florida hunt, is that you really don't have to be that good, especially on a mouth call or whatever, to actually call in some turkeys. And well, I want to tie that into the Florida story because it kind of has something to do with like the calling sequences that worked for us down there and how basically just simple and easy they are, and the kind of calls that especially you use, which we talked a little bit about last year, push button call. The easy.
I didn't use that last year. That's a new this year.
Well, you used it with Greg last year.
Yeah, Greg kills a pile of turkeys with his custom push button I bought.
Yeah. So anyways, we drive down to South Florida last week to go do our first interview, and basically we get down there. The first day we get out with like, I don't know what, 15 minutes of light left. We're trying to get out and roost one really quick. And much to my surprise, we heard gobbles.
Yeah, we did.
Like, I couldn't believe it. I'm going to be honest with you.
I don't want to foreshadow, but we did hear gobbles.
Yes. So, yeah, we went down there, split up. We only got like 100 yards apart down this little road bed, and both independently heard gobbles. So I didn't hear the gobble that you heard, and you didn't hear the gobbles that I heard. But they were definitely gobbles, and they were kind of far off and faint. Which, what you always hear about South Florida is how there's like a lot of people and not that many turkeys. There's definitely a lot of people, but there's more turkeys than I thought there was going to be, for sure.
Yeah, well but also I thought you were going to go a different way with that statement, talking about like how the gobbles are faint. One thing we realized, which I've hunted South Florida before, and the habitat was like unlike anything I've ever experienced in my entire life. Where we went, still pretty much unlike anything I've experienced. Similar, like with palmettos, but it's still quite a bit different. But it's so green and so thick, especially with the cabbage palms, that it just eats that gobble up. As in, it just does not carry nearly as far as it does. Like if we're back here in Alabama, it's completely different. I mean, you could hear one here 800-900 yards pretty easy on a crisp, clear morning. Down there, unless it's a wide open space between you and a bird, you're not going to hear a bird that far, I don't think. I mean, so because that's one thing we heard those birds. And I was like looking at the maps. I'm like, where could the turkey be that I heard? And I'm like pulling up the map. I'm like, oh well, we got a creek bottom here. And I was like measuring. And I was like, oh, it's like 450 yards, 500 yards. I'm like, he might be down in there, but he sounded like he was way further than that. But yeah, it was very surprising. But yeah, I heard birds the first 15 minutes of being on the piece of public, that's always a good sign. I was like, oh, we're going to kill something.
Yeah, so we just went back in the next morning. I mean, we're like, well, crap, we got 2 roosted. So we just split up, went in there the next morning. And
I'm hold on. This gets into the funny stories. We go in the next morning, not walk this place. Like we got on a logging road, that was it. But you cannot stay on the logging road to get to these birds.
Yep.
So you went your way, I went my way. And it took so much longer for me to go 300 yards through this crap than I imagined. It took over an hour. I'm trying to be quiet too. I don't know about you, but it was. And then also, in the back of my mind, I'm thinking eastern diamondbacks, coral snakes, water moccasins, cottonmouths, the occasional gator maybe right here next to some of these sloughs we're walking by. I'm like, this is. It was sketchy at first. I mean, dude, I had, back home I won't really use a headlamp all that much, especially if I'm getting within like 300-400 yards of where I know some birds are at.
You just walk in the dark.
Dude, I had that headlamp. I didn't have it on my head. I was holding it on the lowest setting. And I'm looking, like you couldn't see your feet where your feet were at in the stuff you're walking through. And it's like chest, at least what I got into was chest and head high. And I'm like, if it's my time, it's my time.
Dude,
but I mean, this is terrible.
That's kind of what I was thinking too. I was a little nervous about that walk in because the turkey that I heard, he's kind of on the edge where this swamp meets these thinned pines. And I'm like, well, he might be on the edge of those thin pines, and it's flat. So I don't know how far he can see, so I don't want to go walking through there with a big giant headlamp on my head. And so I'm like, well, I'm just going to man up. I'm just going to walk in the moonlight. And my area wasn't as thick as yours, but it was still, like, I couldn't see my feet. And there's, like, all these palmettos that you're walking through, and they cover the ground, and they're, like, that high off the ground. I'm like, there could be anything under there. There could be literally anything. That's all I could think about, too, as an eastern diamondback. That's all I could think about.
Another great aspect about Florida, which to me kind of comes into later on in the trip. Going down there, I looked at the weather, okay? I'm like, weather's gonna be fantastic. A little cool front coming through, not a cold front, but a cool front. I didn't bring anything warm on this trip other than like a source vest, and that's it. No base layers, no nothing. Later in the trip, I'm just gonna jump ahead a little bit before we continue this aspect. I froze my butt off. Dude, it get down a couple mornings in like the low 40s, high 30s, and the wind was blowing, and dude, I'm telling you, freezing out there. Anyway, I had to borrow Andrew's. Andrew had a pair of sweatpants and a hoodie, and I had to throw that on underneath my camo, and it didn't cut it.
Yeah.
It was rough.
Yeah, I'll tell you one cool thing about that very first morning was I've driven through Florida before. Like, I've driven all the way down to Miami before, or the Keys. And so I've driven, like, right through the middle of the state and seen what it looks like from the highway. But I've never actually gotten off the highway and walked around in some of these swamps. So I didn't really know what it was going to look like. And so that very first morning walking in, it was kind of a cool feeling when I pushed into the swamp just a little bit. And, I mean, I never turned my headlamp on, so I, like, couldn't see anything. There was some moonlight, so I could see a little bit, like, enough where I could get around without the headlamp. But when I got in there and I sat against a tree and I just started waiting for daylight, I was like, man, I have no idea what this place is about to look like. And that was just a really neat feeling because especially in Alabama, but really in the Southeast in general, if I look at it on the map now, I kind of already know what it's probably going to look like. Outside of, like, maybe the understory where there's something I didn't expect, like maybe there's cane in the bottom and I didn't realize, or there's privet or something like that. But outside of that, I kind of know what I'm walking into 99% of the time. In Florida, nope, no idea.
No.
And when it got daylight, I was sitting in this, like, beautiful oak hammock on the edge of that swamp where it's just big live oak hanging over, Spanish moss hanging down. And I was like, this is exactly what I had in mind when I wanted to come and hunt Florida. This is awesome. And I walk up, I let it get daylight, don't hear anything, and I walk up to this big giant pine tree right there in that oak hammock, on the edge of the oak hammock, and there's an Osceola turkey feather sitting there on the ground. I'm like, we're on them. Crap. Like, I couldn't believe it, dude. We just, like, walked straight onto this place and found turkeys. So, how did your morning go?
It was rough. So I didn't make it as far in as I thought because I got stuck in this. I'm telling you, it was over my head high. And at one point, I lie. You know, I said I had my headlamp down on the ground. No, there was one point I had to hold that sucker up above my head to see out in front of me of, like, what is the least tall crap I have to walk through. Because the first 60 yards off the logging road was fine. After that, it was just like staged cover. And it kept getting taller and taller. And there was a point in front of me, I'm like, dude, this stuff's like 12 foot tall. Like, so I'm like standing there. And so if you looked at my Onyx track, I was zigging and I was zagging, dude. Just going back. And I'm like, you could not walk in a straight line. Because, like, I'd get on like a deer trail, or really most of them were pig trails. And I'm like, okay, this isn't terrible. And then all of a sudden, it would be a tunnel. And I'm like, I'm not getting on my hands and knees. I'm not doing that right now. Like, I'm not crawling and getting bitten on the face by a snake. So I ended up getting as far as I felt comfortable. Like, dude, we started walking pretty early. It was like maybe 5:30, okay? I didn't get through all the cover, and it was getting close. Like, daylight was like 7. It was like 6:55, and I hadn't gone a half mile probably. And I'm just sitting here. I got in one spot that was more open than everything else. When I say more open, like, you could actually see your feet there. But it was just in that 30 yard area. Like, I can see my feet. That's it. So I sit down and listen, don't hear anything. I sit there till like probably 7:30. And then I get up, and I think you said you got up and you were kind of easy. That's when you told me you found the feather. And I start easing, and I'm like, I'm just going to try to get to this creek bottom. And I looked in front of me, and it was just a wall of green. It was all like cabbage palm all in front of me. And they're like 9 to 12 foot tall, big palm fronds coming off, huge palm fronds, like 40 inches wide, coming down. And some of them come almost all the way to the ground. I'm like, I'm just going to find me a hog trail. I'm just going to follow it in there. And I just kind of I was just slipping the whole time, just like slipping, hunting like a bobcat, slipping through. And it finally, it got to a spot where it was just all pigskin. Everything was rooted up, destroyed, rooted up area, which made it actually quieter to walk on, which was nice. But I'm like, I got to get out of this. Like, there's zero sign of turkeys, and it's also, I'm like, I think it's way too thick for turkeys. And I end up taking another hog trap, and I finally get out into the creek bottom. And this is like an hour. It was probably 8:30 by the time that happened. No, maybe not that late. Maybe 8 o'clock. And I do a call. I end up getting into the it was like big cypress, and there was oaks in this area in the creek bottom. It kind of just like drawn out to the bottom. It was like kind of grassy understory, but it was way more open than anything else I've walked through. I'm like, this looks way more turkey. Let's do a set up call sequence. And I probably sat there for 30 minutes, did 2 call sequences. Nothing. I kept thinking maybe I heard something walking, but like never could see anything. Finally, I'm going to get up. I'm going to kind of ease like a little bit further into the bottom and maybe try to round where the creek split. And I take 5 steps, and I'm like, I just happen to like look to my right. And when I look to my right, all I see is 3 red-headed turkeys. Don't know what they are, but they're 60 yards from me, just like staring at me, like just like looking, like kind of like tilting their head, like kind of looking at me. And I'm like, what? I'm like, there's no way. And I saw the redheads. I was like, oh my God, it's a freaking group of long beards. So like, dude, I had the gun, and I was like froze, like literally like half step. Like I had 1 foot fully planted, and 1 foot was like not off the ground, but it was like just my toe. And I'm like, I'm not moving. I'm just going to stay in here for a second. And, you know, they started putting, and they started turning around and walking, kind of going in a circle. And I could see they were all jakes. There's 5 of them. And I'm like, okay, cool. We got jakes in there. I'm like, great, we got jakes. We got long beards. And they finally actually just, I thought they were going to fly off, but they just like walked off like, pop, 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 pop.
They're like putting at you?
Yeah, just putting and just like kind of walking back down to the bottom. I'm like, okay, cool. I stayed there for another probably 15 minutes, let them kind of ease off. And actually, when they eased off, I could hear a hen yelping across the creek from me, across the drainage, kind of like in the direction they were walking. I'm like, there's got to be a longbeard in here. So I ended up grabbing my stuff and swinging real slow. I mean, again, keep saying like hunt like a bobcat, but it's like slowly working my way, and did like almost like a half semicircle J hook around to the other side of the creek, and got reset up. And well, when I said get reset up, actually before I got reset up, I found turkey tracks, found gobbler tracks out there in the creek bottom, like in some of the soft ground and in the grass. And I'm like, this is perfect. So I ended up setting them up on the point of this this timber block where the creek split. And I could see in front of me, there's like a couple oaks, and it was all scratched up. I'm like, this is what I needed. Like, I need some places. There's tracks here. There's some scratching here. I'm only 150 yards from where I saw those jakes, but I did a 300-yard circle to kind of get in position and set up, and that's where I did my second calling sequence. So that's where it got a lot more interesting. So
you just circled what, like, and trying to get ahead of them, basically?
Not even get ahead of them, but they went off that direction. I could heard hens over there. So I'm like, I'm just going to reposition over in that general area, but a little bit further down the creek, in order to try to see if I can call a gobbler. If there's a gobbler on the other side of the creek right there, see if I can call a gobbler, you know, out of some of these like palm fronds. There was a bunch of the cabbage palms kind of going up there. But if you get on the ground, get kind of on turkey's level, you can see 50, 60 yards through that stuff. But if you stand up, it looks like a wall.
Yeah, it's crazy walking through that stuff, because when you come up to the edge of it, you're like, oh my gosh. Like, first of all, it looks, again, like the snakiest stuff you've ever seen, because all those big palm fronds fall on the ground and they're kind of sitting on each other, and it's just a lot of structure, which
oh yeah, like. Dead palm fronds. Oh yeah, it screamed rattlesnake and copperheads.
I did not like that one bit. And but you get up under it and you start walking, and it's actually, and some of them, depending on the size of the trees, but there'll be some of those little palm groves that looked really nasty, but if you get into it, you can actually walk pretty easily through it, and quietly, surprisingly quietly, as long as you're not bumping into those palm fronds. But I was actually walking through some of that stuff, and I'm just like, man, I don't even know where a turkey would be in here. And then I would come across a turkey track right smack in the middle of the thicket. I mean, in the middle of like a bunch of hog rooting too. It'd be a big fresh turkey track right there. I'm like, okay, I guess they are in here. I don't know how to set up on this or call to them or whatever, but one of the challenging things that I was running into about that same time was, like, down there, it's so thick in the understory, and everything is so random, it seems like, that you never really know what you're calling into. You know, like, you don't know what it looks like 100 yards ahead of you. And so I ended up working out in the swamp, and then that's about the time that you set up and did your second calling sequence.
Yeah, so I ended up doing my second call sequence, got up against another cypress. and sat down. And one thing I started doing was on the second setup, and I started doing it now for like pretty much every setup I had, I'd take my pocket knife out and I'd cut a couple palm fronds, and actually or palmetto leaves, and I'd actually set them like over a shoulder and then also like a little bit in front of me and kind of semi-brush in. Because when you got in like one of those little openings, it was either dog hair thick for the most part, relatively, like visually thick. You could walk through some of it, or it was like wide open stuff. And I was kind of like sitting up on the edge of that. So I was like, I'm taking some palm fronds. I kind of like brushed in around this tree real quietly and got set up. And I was sitting there doing kind of, again, like a soft calling sequence. So I'm like, we were 4 days after the opener. I was like, I'm sure there's a bunch of guys that was down here hunting this place on the opener. I'm not going to be calling crazy aggressive because I'm sure everybody else has, ever how many people have been hunting on this place. So I'm like just doing super soft clucks, yelps, purrs, stuff like that. And I did one call sequence, and all of a sudden, out in front of me, actually, out in front of me, I'm like looking, I'm kind of like in this little cove, this opening spot where it's like big cabbage palms kind of like directly in front of me, kind of rolling the edge of this, around this timber, kind of like mixed pines and hardwoods. And then it kind of shot back out in front of me to my right, and I'm kind of like in this little cove. And I was looking into that stuff, and all of a sudden I saw what looked like a turkey head. Like I saw something that like came up, kind of looked like a turkey head, and then it like moved a little bit, and then it kind of disappeared. And I'm like, maybe it was just like a shadow or something because the sunlight was coming through. Well, then I'm looking, and I see, I was like, that had to be a turkey, walk between two different cabbage palms, like just go right between them. And I'm like, that was like a freaking big coon, or that like it was a turkey just like walked through. And I just sit there, I'm sitting there, had the gun up, and it hadn't called. This is probably 10 minutes after I called, and then all of a sudden I hear loud scratching, like, and like you could hear like a couple. It sounded like a couple different birds scratching, and they're just right there, like sound like within 100 yards of me, like inside that stuff. So when I heard that, I got my little flap and scratch out from old Preston that he gave us.
Yeah.
And I start scratching, doing some soft purrs and clucks. And did that for, maybe 30 seconds. And I stopped. The scratching stopped. Probably again, another 10 minutes goes by, and I could hear scratching again. So I break out the push button, and I do some.
Have you called yet at this point?
Oh, yeah. Okay. Yeah. This was going into the third calling sequence into the spot.
Gotcha.
But I ended up bringing the push button out, and I started doing some yelps on it in clucks. And then
Here, grab that thing. Hit us with it.
So this is Mike Lepp from Pennsylvania. He's a buddy of Greg May here. This is one of his custom push buttons. Greg had one of these last year, and actually got to see him kill a bird with it. And he was telling me, "Oh man, yeah, I use a push button." I'm like, "Really?" Because you always hear like push buttons are like, something super cheap that someone that doesn't know what they're doing, that's what they use and all this kind of stuff. And Greg had one, and it sounded so good, dude. And it was like, now he's been running his for years now. I think he's had one or two of them now for 6-7 years. And he has a lot of control with it. I'm still learning that, especially when making like some super soft clucks and everything. Because it's just like the littlest bit of pressure, and you have to have the right amount of pressure down on the push side of it. And then also like the right amount of distance that you're traveling for like super soft clucks. But I brought this out and started doing some clucks and some yelps on it. Like did like two like short yelp sequences. And when I did that, the scratching stopped. And 30 seconds later, I see a red and white head. There's a big down tree in front of me, and it going right to left in front of me at probably 70 yards. I see this big white and red head kind of pop up, and then it goes back down, and I see a full tail fan come up.
Oh.
On that tree. I'm like, oh, bull. I'm like, dude, no. I'm like, there ain't no way this is about to happen. I'm like, dude, first morning in Florida, are you kidding me?
So it might be the off season, but we're still always thinking about whitetails. And if you're looking to get more mobile this fall and you're looking at saddle setups, the two most common designs you're gonna see are a single panel design or a double panel design. They both have their advantages and disadvantages. A single panel design is gonna be more comfortable right out of the box, while a double panel design is gonna be much more adjustable and customizable to your fit. We always say on the podcast, saddles are kind of like boots. Different people are going to like different things. As a general rule of thumb, I found that heavier set guys typically like a single panel more than they like a double panel. But other than that, it's just really a matter of preference. I personally use both of these saddles. This is the Method 2 from Latitude, and this is the Lone Star from Latitude. I will say that the Method 2 is really nice because it's a 2-panel design. It's almost like you have a built-in back band that'll take a little bit of pressure off your back when you're sitting down. But if you're just getting into saddle hunting and you want something that's extremely comfortable right out of the box, the Lone Star is going to be your go-to. It has an advanced hip pinch reduction system in it, so right out of the box, this is going to be very comfortable, and you're not going to have the hip pinch issues that a lot of people have when they first get into saddle hunting. So if you want to be more mobile this fall, check out latitudeoutdoors.com to see these 2 saddles and a bunch of other mobile hunting gear. We've enjoyed them a lot, and I think you're going to enjoy them too. Hey guys, Andrew here with an in the field tip. If you're looking to get more proficient with a mouth call specifically, I recommend going with a call like this. This is the KB Hen from Houndstooth Game Calls, and the reason I say this is because of the cuts on this call. A lot of the bottom reeds are exposed. The bottom reeds are where you get your clean notes. So with a call like this that's cut and has a lot of those bottom reeds exposed, it's easier for you to channel your air and find where that clean note is to almost produce like a whistle or a squeak. And once you find that, there's the front end of your yelp, and then the top reed with the cut on it is where you get your rasp. So if you're trying to figure out how to do that clean 2-tone yelp, I recommend something like this, the KB Hen, to get started. Find that high note, and then you'll be off and running. If you want to check out the KB Hen and a bunch of other mouth calls, go to houndstoothgamecalls.com, and you can use the promo code Southern25 for a discount.
All right, guys, we got another in the field tip for you today. One thing we're doing right now while we're out here scouting is looking at overlooked spots and overlooked by us. One thing we always do while we're in the field is using our tracker on onX Hunt to be able to not only see where we've gone, but where we haven't been, and that's what we're going to go look at. So today, we're actually going to work up into a drainage that we haven't been to before. We've walked all around it, but we haven't been up in it. And again, it's a very important factor of using the tracker so you can see where you have been and where you haven't. A lot of times those places you haven't been is your overlooked spots. So if you want to try onX Hunt, you can download onX Hunt today and use the code Southern and save 20% on your membership. So tail fan comes up and then tail fan goes back down. And I'm like, so I get the gun up, dude. Now my heart is like, before this, when I first heard the scratching, my heart rate kind of got up, but it's been 20 minutes since I first heard the scratching. And dude, I get that gun up, dude. And there's like a giant oak tree, like right where that big tree had fallen. There's a big one just off the side of it, off the end of it, around the root ball, and that's where that turkey's coming. So I'm like, I just had that red dot, I mean, just buried right there next to that tree, and it's opening right there. And then as that first gobbler he disappears, I see 3 more red and white heads pop up from behind the tree, kind of like coming right to left, and I'm like, ain't no freaking way, dude. So I'm like, okay, sweet. Like this is gonna be awesome. So I'm sitting there, got the gun up and everything. And that first gobbler, he comes out, and I see his beard swinging, and he's almost like in kind of like they call it like a quarter strut, like not half strut, but like he's kind of got some feathers up, and he's kind of like just dead stacking, and he's like they're quartering towards me, coming around that tree. But still going right to left, and he kind of comes through the gap, and I'm like, okay, no, like, I'm gonna wait, let him go through. Like, I got 3 more coming in, maybe like one of them will cut and come right at me. So he kind of like walks through, and I got the red dot right there, and also the first one pops out, and it's a Jake. I'm like, okay. Second one pops out, it's a Jake. And I'm like, oh crap. Third one pops out, it's a Jake. I'm like, oh no. So I swing that gun back over on that freaking gobbler, dude.
How far did you have to swing?
No, I mean like not far. Like, I mean, yeah, not like he's way over here, but it's like instead of being right here, it's like right there. So I just moved the gun over back on him, and he at that point he'd come through that big opening.
So you let him get through your gap.
Yeah.
You greedy son of a gun.
Yeah, I know. So lessons learned. So they're working again, coming like quartering towards me, but going right to left, and they're kind of coming around the head of like this open stuff, going back to the cabbage palms off like that are directly in front of me and kind of off my left side. And I'm like, crap, he's about to get in that crap. So I'm like, I gotta make something happen. No. Okay. So he's going between trees, and I'm like, oh, there's a gap right there. So I like move my gun over a little bit to the left, and I'm looking right down. I'm looking right there at that gap, And the second his head comes right to that tree, those two trees, the trees are like sitting like this for all the video listeners. They're kind of crossed a little bit. Like there's a gap between them. The second his head comes into that, I'm like, boom, I shoot. And when I shoot, dude, first off, those 3 jakes just stood there. And they're like, what was that? And then all of a sudden I see that gobbler just take off running. And I'm like, oh, I'm like, no. I'm like, no. So I get up, dude. I don't grab another shell. I'm getting shooting the over and under. And I just like hightail it over there. And I run over there, and those jakes are like, bark, 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 bark. Like, dude, they let me get to like 30 yards of them, okay?
You're just running through.
Yeah, I'm like running, and they just they take off. They just like they start running through the palmettos. So I see the gobbler, and he's like running through the palmettos, and this is what I'm like, oh man. So I'm like, let me go get another shot at him. So I follow him, and I just lose him in the palmettos. Like he gets in these big palmettos, and I'm like, I just don't know what direction he goes. And also, by the way, when you get in palmettos like that under the canopy, it's hard to know what direction you're going.
Oh yeah.
And I left my phone and everything like next to the tree. And I'm like, I'm just like zigzagging. And I'm like, let me see if I can just find him, okay? End up never finding him. I go like 100 yards. I say 100 yards now. I don't know how far it was because, again, I was just walking. Might have been further than that. And all of a sudden, I like see movement to my right. And I look, and there's those 3 jakes right there. And I'm like, and they're probably 35 yards, 40 yards from me. And they kind of like look over at me. And then they start doing some like it sounded like, it wasn't like jake yelps. It was like hen yelps, like kind of high pitched like yelps, like bark, bark, bark. And they just like walk. I'm like, oh, maybe the longbeards with them. So I crouched down and like looked down like this lane in between these trees, and they all kind of came through walking out in front of me, and the longbeard wasn't with them. And they just kind of eased off. I'm like, you're kidding me. So I walked back, went back, found the trees I shot through, and just one of them, first off, pulled the shot. Second of all, pulled the shot, rushed the shot. One of the trees ate my whole pattern.
Oh,
like
man.
when I went to pulling that trigger, dude, I pulled it right into one of those trees, and it was just peppered. And I'm like, yeah. And looking back at it, he was probably. I always tell myself like I don't shoot past like 45 yards. Okay, I haven't killed a bird past 45 yards. That bird was probably, looking back at it. Actually, got rearranged stuff down here. I didn't have my rangefinder with me. I said he was 60. I don't think he was that far. He was probably inside like 55 maybe. But again, walking, kind of going, he was moving right to left. I just rushed it, and I should have just stopped. He might have swung all the way in and just rushed the opportunity. Freaking didn't kill a bird.
Man.
And I was heartbroken. I was like, I went back to my phone. I saw I had a missed call from you. I'm like, of course, Andrew's calling me.
You're like, no, I can't hide it.
Yeah. But
yeah, I was over on the other side of the swamp. I was following some of those tracks through those cabbage palms I was telling you about. And I just made a couple setups, or I just made a setup, and I called, and I was just sitting there dead silent, just waiting to see if I could hear anything, listening. It was real calm that morning, too. No wind or anything like that. And I just heard that shot well through the swamp. And I was looking at Onyx, and I was like, that was Jacob. That had to be Jacob. And then I called you, and you didn't answer. I was like, oh, yeah, it was Jacob. He shot one. And then, like, 2 or 3 minutes go by, and you haven't texted or called back. I'm like, I bet he didn't kill it. I bet he's looking for it or something. So, just shot a tree, huh?
Shot 8, yeah. Yeah, absolutely hammered a tree. But, I mean, dude.
Never done that.
But the thing was, I'm like, from the first call sequence, second call sequence, as a straight line, it was 150 yards. But again, I was calling real soft, so like this push. But I was using my ceramic too, which I got that. So this is that houndstooth Dixie Hen custom ceramic, and I really like this call. Again, that's what I used for all my 4 Alabama birds last year, along with Thomas's 4 Alabama birds. Called them in the same call, and then you killed one with it too. And I really liked it, but I was using it and the push button kind of back and forth. And for whatever reason, because I had called twice with the ceramic and they never broke, but when I used the push button, it was like, for I guess what they wanted here, at least the break come in and kind of strut. Looking back at it again, should have just waited and kind of watched, or maybe did some soft clucks or scratching the leaves when they were coming up right before they came around the tree, and see if I could get them to kind of just keep swinging in. Because what I think they would have done, because I learned this, I felt like I realized this throughout the hunt, those birds that actually down there use cover. Like, they don't like to necessarily be in the wide open. and I think they were going to hit that edge and just work that edge all the way down to 30 yards from me. Is what I think they would have done.
Yeah, well, a lot of times too, they'll kind of almost J hook into a spot. Like I've killed a bunch of turkeys that came in like what you're talking about, to where they're walking like maybe left to right, and it looks like they're just going to walk by you, but then at some point they turn and just come right to you.
Yeah,
which we had some turkeys do that later in the trip.
Yeah,
we'll talk about.
Well, and again, that's looking back at it. I was like, rushed the shot. Heart rate was through the freaking roof, dude. I'm telling you, it was, dude. Adrenaline was pumped, dude. It was stupid.
Do you think if you would have shot him when he walked through that first gap, you think you'd have got him?
Maybe. I mean, he was still just walking. That's not my thing. Is like the last 2 birds I've missed, or last 3 birds I missed. I missed 2 last season before I killed my 4. They were all moving like that. They were all going like left to right, right to left. And they were all at like one lash. I don't even know how I missed them, but it's 35 yards. Put it right on them. Shot. Went and shot paper afterwards. Gun shoots fine. I might just freaking yanked the shot or something. I don't know.
Yep.
Just pulled low. I don't know. But the first one I missed last year was the same kind of situation. Second one I missed last year, he was closer, but still similar situation, kind of walking left to right with a hen. And then this one was kind of going right to left. And it's like, I was talking to some guys, and they're like, man, this is a hard shot. Like, especially even if they're close, to like bear down the gun and hit them walking like that. Like, really, like we were talking to, I won't say his name, but the guy that we interviewed, one of the guys we interviewed in Florida, which we did a deer episode with, but we were talking turkeys before and after the podcast. And he said the same situation, like how it's a hard shot, and he always like tries to like get their attention, like either moves or something, trying to get them to stop and stretch that head up.
He said he'll have his hand on the front of the gun, and his pointer finger, he'll just like wiggle his pointer finger on the front of his gun and that gets him to like look up. But it's not such a spook that they like take off or something.
Yeah.
Like they're like, what is that? You know.
Yeah.
And it gets them to raise their head up too,
Yeah.
like if they're strutting.
Anyway, but dude, he had a big old swinging beard on him. I'm like, and dude, he was like, kind of seen, that's now, I don't know if it's the same group of jakes as the ones I'd seen earlier. Probably, maybe not sure. But the first group had 5. This other group had the long beard and 3 with them. And like, also one thing I noticed, I'm like, the jakes looked probably, I don't know, maybe 12 pounds ish, like, you know, like a jake. That gobbler looked freaking gigantic. Okay, and going down to like kind of more South Florida, I was assuming a lot of these turkeys were going to be like a gobbler is going to be 14 pounds, maybe.
Yeah.
Like, because you see a lot of birds like that. Like you see guys kill birds and they're like full tail fan, great spurs, great beard, but they're just little bodied birds, turkeys, and that was not what I experienced with that gobbler. But yeah, that was heartbreaking. But
Did you hear his spurs clanking together as he ran away?
No. Did not hear that. But again, I was like, it gave me, like, it was frustrating. I'm like, I can't believe I missed that opportunity. But also I'm like, oh, we're definitely going to kill birds. Like, I'm so confident right now of kind of like what's working, the area, all that kind of stuff. And it was interesting.
Well, it was kind of fun because that first day, like, you did not do any planning whatsoever for this trip, essentially. I kind of did some research on the area. I map scouted, and then I confirmed with some locals where we wanted to go. And I was thinking that we were going to have to, like, you were like, whatever, just turn me loose. Like, I'll just go find them. And I was thinking that we were going to have to bounce and do, like, 3 or 4 different areas before we actually found birds. But there was just one area in particular that I was the most interested in, based on the map and everything, and that's where this was.
And to give people an idea, it had water, had a creek system running through it.
Yep.
It had habitat diversity from pines to hardwoods to cypress. It had everything kind of in one general area. And yeah, I mean, it had like all that like habitat diversity in one spot.
Yep.
And that's one thing that seems to be a commonality with a lot of places we hunt. It's like if you have that good habitat diversity, there's going to be birds there. With
Also,
water.
Going back to what you said earlier too, about which we just got lucky and we hit it on the first try here. But the other thing is that crap you had to walk through to get in there. Because this place, we can't say the exact number of people that hunted because it would give away the place, but it was a bunch. a bunch.
Yeah.
If you look at the math of the acreage of this place versus the amount of people who checked in to hunt it, the math does not math.
No.
It is like ridiculous.
Ridiculous.
So those turkeys had been just absolutely hammered the weekend before we got there. And they'd already killed a bunch of turkeys that weekend. I mean, they killed a bunch of turkeys.
Yeah.
And I think that those birds were just kind of sheltered from all that because I'm sure that one or two people walked in there, but most of those guys aren't going to walk through that kind of stuff to get into a spot like that.
And listen,
so
one thing we realized in Florida, and I knew this from other guys we've talked to down in Florida, like you can use e-bikes on a decent amount of public, but they have like all these different rules and regulations. You weren't going to take nothing like that in there. Like
absolutely.
You literally physically could not. Like an e-bike was going to do you zero good.
Yeah.
Zero.
Well, and a lot of the advice that we got from people, I mean, multiple people on Hunt in Florida was like, hey, just cruise the roads, find the tracks, and then take it from there. Mm-hmm. Like, that ended up working later in the trip for finding a bird, but nothing that was gobbling. And it turns out that the only birds that were actually being vocal were in this, like, hellhole that was hard to get into. So, like, the walking the roads things works, but, man, you're going to run into people.
I mean, it was a moat. Like, they had a moat of not only water surrounding them, but super, super thick cover. I mean, snaky,
thick cover.
And after talking to a local, actually, I say it wasn't even a local. We ran into a listener while we were down there, and he was telling me while you were talking to another guy that, you know, he's like, yeah, we got alligators down here and all this kind of stuff. I'm like, I'm sure you do. He's like, also, this is like breeding season. So he's like, you'll find bull gators nowhere near water because they're like looking for females. Bro. And he's like, I'm like, what do you mean? He's like, I was going down to this one spot on the Peace Public, going down one of the road systems on his e-bike. And he's like, I came across what I thought was a log. But he's like, it was like a 9.5, 10-foot gator that was laying across the road. And he's like, he was over 600 yards from water. Dude. Just chilling there. And I'm like, He's like, yeah. So he's like, you go through like some of those palmettos and stuff, just double check when you're walking.
Oh my gosh.
You know, might get your legs snatched.
Yeah.
But anyways, so
they had their little fortress back.
Yeah, they had their little fortress. But like when I walked into like, after I realized what happened, came grab my stuff, kind of sat there for a little bit. I'm like, I'm just gonna let everything kind of chill out. Sat there for another 30 minutes before I kind of made a move. And I'm just like, I'm gonna keep doing my little loop and kind of working up this other little creek bottom. Because like I've hunted around where like I've been on turkeys when someone else shot one of the birds. Like it wasn't the bird I was trying to hunt, but it was, you know, within 300 yards I had shot another turkey. And after 30 minutes, the turkey gets back to gobbling. Like the one I was hunting got back to gobbling. Mm-hmm. So I'm like, I'm not super worried that like it spooked them like super bad. Because I'm like, they've already heard a lot of gunshots. So I mean, what's another one to them? And when I got into like the little cabbage palm thicket right there off the creek, it was all scratched. Like there was turkey scratch everywhere in there, like fresh, old, mix of everything. And there was pigs on too, but there's a lot of turkey scratch. And I'm like, well, this is an area that they are seriously want to spend a lot of time in. And I ended up going a little bit further up the bottom. And this is the problem. I didn't have my phone when I was looking for the turkey, but as I was kind of following where I thought the turkey went, I ended up working to like an open spot in the timber where it was like around it was palmettos, and then it was like big open area where it was, you could see like one area, like one section of it went like 100 yards kind of open. Another section, it was like 75, 80 yards open. And I was thinking like this would be a good place to call. By the way, it took me freaking 45 minutes to find it the second time going back in there. Because I couldn't figure out exactly what direction I was walking. Because like you can't see the sun. It's like closed canopy crap above you. And you're walking through all this palmetto stuff. And all of a sudden you just open up to this area. And it took me 45 minutes to find it. Well, anyways, I find it. End up setting up and do another call sequence. And this is, again, an hour after I missed that bird. Maybe an hour and a half. And I set up, Bill brushed me in another little blind with some palm fronds. And I'm sitting there doing another call sequence. And I don't know, 5 minutes later, I hear something rustling, like kind of like sound like scratching in. I'm like, there's another turkey in here. And it's like off my left. And I'm like, there's some palm fronds right there. I'm like kind of looking through it, like eyeballing and just kind of moving a little bit. And also I see this like black thing. I'm like, oh my God, it's a turkey. I'm like, there's another one in here. And dude, I ain't gone another 200 yards maybe from the third setup. Well, then I see, I'm looking and I'm like, oh crap, no, it's a pig. and I'm like, there's 3, I think it looked like I could see 3 pigs. It might have been more than that, but they were like I don't know, 60, 70 yards off my kind of left shoulder. I'm like, okay, well, I'm not gonna worry about the pigs. And dude, I just all I do, I just turn my head slowly back to the right, and there's 2 turkeys standing right here at 35 yards. And I'm like, I never heard them walk in. And I look, and I see redheads. I'm like, first thing I see is I see redheads. Their heads kind of up, looking around, and I'm like, oh God, no, because I have my gun. My gun is pointed kind of at my almost 11 o'clock, and they're at 1:30 and 35 yards. And I like look, and I'm like looking at them, and I'm like, oh, it's 2 Jakes again. And I'm like, don't know if it's the same Jakes I've shot at, or I didn't shoot at them, but shot their buddy Longbeard that was with them, or it was other Jakes, or Jakes from earlier in the morning. I don't know. But it's 2 Jakes, and they came in, and dude, they would not leave. I did that one call scenes, and they would not leave. They were like kind of going back and forth right here in front of me, back and forth, like just looking. When they turned around and they weren't looking at me, or they got behind stuff, I'd like scratch on that flap and scratch. And then they kind of come back around. They walk a little bit closer, just looking at it. And dude, I took that push button. I was just messing with them, just clucking on it, just like real soft. Like, hold on, let's see if I can do it real quick. Like that. And dude, they get their head back up and they like come back over. And at that point, I'm like, they can't see me. Like I'm in the shadow of this big pine tree. I've got all these palm fronds around. I'm like, dude, I'm camouflage. And dude, they hung out for 30 minutes, and finally those pigs get close. And they didn't even care about the pigs. They'd look over at the pigs and didn't care about the pigs. But my wind switched. It blew right at the pigs, and the pigs just exploded running out of there. It was definitely more than 3 pigs. They took off running across his bottom. Well, when they did that, the turkeys got super spooked. And they were like, we're out of here. And dude, they kind of went running down to the bottom too. But I was like, I did 3 setups and called in birds on every setup. But again, it was 11 total, I think I'd seen. 9, 4. Yeah. So it was 11 total. And it was all male turkeys. It wasn't a single hen. It was Jakes, 10 Jakes, and 1 gobbler. I freaking missed the gobbler.
Yeah, that's one thing about hunting down there is there's no shortage of places to hide. Like really good hides too. Yeah, while you were doing that, after I found out that you missed, I kind of started working in your direction, trying to get to the same patch of woods that you were hunting. Because I was basically hunting the creek bottom, and you had crossed the creek bottom and gotten to a different patch of woods. And so I was like, well, I just need to cross this. And dude, I was so on edge the whole time because everything down there looks like the absolute most snaky, snake-filled cover ever. Where if you were walking through stuff like that in Alabama, you'd see, I don't know, you'd see like 10 snakes probably at least. Like cottonmouths, stuff like that. I wasn't seeing any. I was like, I don't know whether or not I should feel good or bad about not seeing any snakes so far. I think, though, that it's just because there's so much of that habitat for them that maybe they're a little more spread out and they're not concentrated in spots. I don't know. But I wasn't seeing anything. So I took my sweet time crossing that bottom because I was like, I ain't getting bit by a snake in here. And when I finally got over into your patch of woods, it looked really good, and there was a lot of tracks coming out of that swamp going into that patch of woods. Turkey tracks, like just, and deer tracks, everything, but especially turkey tracks. Like, seemed like they were just crossing that swamp to get to those pines that you were in. And when I got over there, one of the things, going back to the whole thing about the cover being weird down there, is when I got into that patch of woods, I never knew what I was walking into. It's like I would walk 10 yards, and I'd be looking, and it's all like really thick saplings. That are, I don't know, I think it's Yopon or something like that. And it'd be like, I mean, dense cover. Like something a turkey's definitely not going to walk through. And then you'd squeeze through that or go around the edge of it, and then all of a sudden you'd come to like a little opening, and you'd be like, oh, this would be a good spot. And I'd set up and call. And then I would sit there for however long, just blind calling because nothing's gobbling. And you'd get up and go walk to keep going, and you find out that you were just calling straight into a thicket where there's not going to be a turkey. Like you're in this little opening, but everything beyond the opening is way too thick, and you just walked through the only woods that a turkey'd probably come through, if that makes sense. And so that was like super challenging. And I eventually was getting ready to meet you. You were going to start working my way. and I was going to do one more calling sequence, and I finally felt like I'd snuck into like a good patch of woods that I didn't mess up. I hadn't walked through it yet, and I had just hung up the phone with you, and I went and picked out a tree, and I scratched. Like when I go to scratch out my little spot on the tree, I try to sound like a hen scratching. I get the leaves out. So I scratch a little bit, get real comfortable and everything, and then just do like little bitty clucks and some yelps. And not 2 minutes later, directly behind me, I hear something walk up to, I don't know how close it got, but definitely sounded like a turkey. But I mean, it was directly behind me, and I couldn't turn, and I heard it walk up, and it stood around for a minute, and then I heard it walk off.
Might have been one of those Florida Panthers.
Might have been a Florida Panther, baby. I don't know. Maybe it's a big old bull gator looking for a meal. So after that, you walked up, and we got out of there. And well, go ahead.
That's when I realized when we walked out, you had a way better way going in than I did.
Oh, I had
I was jealous
getting in there. Yeah, it was easy. Super easy. Yeah, we crossed back over the swamp, got out of there. Had to go actually do our interview that night. So then Sam and Blakely showed up. We started hunting with them, and we'll have to save some of these stories for maybe when they're on. And also, we're running super long with this already. So let's see, what do you want to skip to? Because I don't want to walk through day by day because it'll take too long.
No, I mean, I froze my butt off a couple mornings.
It was cold.
Cold. Like, y'all up in PA and up in the northern Midwest area, like, oh man, 35 degrees, 40 degrees, y'all are pansies. Dude, I froze my butt off because I didn't bring anything for that. I was dressing for like 85, like 65 to like 85 degree temps. Was not dressed for have anything for 40 degree temps. The other thing was, well, there's a couple things you're talking about. I do want to bring this up. Talking about like snakes and everything. I was looking for snakes the whole time. I never ran into a snake. Never saw a snake. I know Sam and Blakely, they didn't see snakes. You're the only person that saw snakes.
I saw 3 black rat snakes, and they were all in the exact same kind of habitat.
Well, one about crawled over you while we were sitting. I was about taking a nap. I took some of my best naps ever down in Florida.
Oh yeah. So that hunt, we'll go to that one. So that morning, we were actually going into a different area that we wanted to check out.
Oh, this is great. Oh, okay.
So that morning we were walking in, and like I said, we had multiple areas pinned that we wanted to check out. And you had found your birds in that spot. So we're like, okay, we know that they're there. We had walked all over that patch of woods. You'd shot at the turkey. Mm-hmm. So we're like, maybe let's give it a day or two before we go back in there, because we had all week. Let's go try one of these other spots. So we go to walk into this spot, and I had my moment with the thicket before daylight.
Well, that's what I was gonna bring that up. So we had to walk in another like mile and a half, and I was gonna go to one spot to go sit on, like, listen around a couple ponds that was back in the timber, and then you were gonna go to like another like pond or two to kind of go listen.
When you say pond, we're talking about cypress domes. I call it a cypress dome.
Pond, cypress dome. There's water. Should be, at least looking at.
Actually, there's usually not. At least when we were down there.
Yeah, I mean, if it was wet, but it was dry while we were there. But we ended up splitting off after walking through one cypress dome in order cypress head as, and you went one way, I went one way. I finally get, this is why I need to tell this part of the story. I finally go through some of these ponds, and instead of like getting off into the woods, I was like, running late on time, taking us longer to walk in than I was expecting. I'm like, I'm just going to sit on the edge of these pines, like these big kind of open pines, and I'm going to listen and try to see if I can hear one gobble way back in there. So I sat up against this tree, and I was like, it had probably been 15 minutes I was sitting there, and all of a sudden, dude, I hear this thing coming in behind me. And I had deer on multiple hunts come walking through, and they're kind of loud coming through some of the stuff. And I hear this thing kind of coming over my shoulder that's just loud. I'm like, man, what the crap? What is that? And I kind of like ease up, and it started getting like loud, like something big, like pushed through some cover. I'm like, dude, that might be a big boar. And dude, I'm not gonna. I had that gun, have my gun already loaded. I'm sitting there, I'm like, what is this? And this is before daylight, guys. And I'm like, just looking. And I'm like, I don't see anything, but I keep hearing it. Well, finally, I see like this flash of a light. I'm like, son of a, like, so, I'm like, someone is walking. Like, I don't know how they got in here, but someone's walking down the tree line, like coming down through all this thick stuff. So I stand up and I see them. I see the light moving at a pretty good pace. I'm like, man, someone on a freaking e-bike. And I'm like, how in the heck? Like, I'm looking at the map. I'm like, I don't even know how they got an e-bike back in here. And it was just like, just the way they were moving. So I'm like, dude, they're walking like right into like what I want, like coming down right what I want to listen at. So, dude, I stand up. I get my 1400 lumen headlight. And I'm like, cut my hand over it. And I cranked that sucker all the way up. And then I just freaking like held it up and took my hand off to like freaking blind them. And it lit up the woods like I'm talking, it was daylight. And all of a sudden it stops. And I'm like, okay. And then like their kind of light disappears. I pull my light back down and like I don't hear anything. And it's like maybe a minute goes by. Well, then I'll just I whistle. Nothing. I whistle again. And then they whistle back. I walk in, start walking that direction. And as I'm walking the direction, I have my headlight on, whatever. They're coming walking. They're like 75, 80 yards. They come walking up, and I realized it was you. Freaking noob. It was Andrew. This sucker right here got lost in the thicket and came over there. Just bushwhacking.
Well, so what happened was we were supposed to hit this tree line, and you were going to go 200-300 yards south. I was going to go 200-300 yards north and go to these different ponds. Well, when we got to the split-off point, you just chickened out and you're like, I'm just going to stand right here. I tried to go where I was supposed to go, and there was like this little, I don't even know what it was. Like a little, it wasn't a creek. It's just like a low spot right there on that timberline. And I start walking into it, and I keep going, and I keep going, and I keep going, and it keeps getting thicker and thicker and thicker until finally I'm down in the bottom of this low spot, and it is cypress knees and stumps and fallen trees and saplings and briars and vines. It was some of the thickest crap I've ever been in my life. And I get in there, and I'm just like, maybe I can push through the other side. I'm looking at my phone. I'm like 10 yards from the edge of the other side of it, and I cannot get through it. Again, snakiest stuff ever. Especially this spot. This might have been the worst spot ever, like on the whole trip. And I can't push through it like at all. I've got vines like grabbing my legs, getting tangled up. I got saplings coming around and whipping me in the face because like you can't turn without running into a bunch of saplings. And then also the cypress knees and the stumps in there. There's like stumps from dead trees. And then also little dirt mounds from where trees have fallen over and the root balls stuck up. Well, all that has like this vegetation like draped over it, like growing over it. So you take a step on something you think is solid and you'd go up to your knee into some kind of opening underneath all that stuff. And I'm just like, ugh, this is like the snakiest crap ever. And I walked in there and I went a grand total of like 30 yards. And it took me like 15 minutes to get out of it. 15 minutes to go 20 yards, 30 yards. And it got so bad, I thought I was going to have to wait for daylight. I literally stopped for a second. I'm like, I got my headlamp on, I'm steaming. Like my whole body is steaming because I'm sweating so much trying to get out of there. And I'm like, I'm just going to have to wait for daylight. I'm going to stand on top of one of these stumps so a snake can't bite me. And I'm just going to wait for daylight. And so I cut my headlamp off and I stood there and kind of caught my breath. And I was like, no, I think I'm just going to see if I can go around it. So I'm like, I'll just go back out to where I ran into, or where me and Jacob split off, and I'll just hit the woods, and I'll just go like 10 yards inside of the woods and swing around this. Because I knew it didn't go into the wood line very far. And so when I got back out, I found a hog trail that went through all the palmettos and everything. And that's when you saw me walking really fast, because again, short on time, and you thought it was an e-bike. Because I hit that hog trail, dude, and I was going. And then I get to the wood line, and then that's when you flashed me with your light, and I was like, that had to be Jacob. But there was a part of me, because you were supposed to be like 200 yards further down, and I was like, crap, is that not Jacob? I had the same thought. I was like, son of a gun, someone's freaking walked in here. Like, and we were in the most random spot. I'm like, how did someone walk to this spot? And then you started walking over. I was like, oh, that's Jacob. I could tell you walk a certain way. I could see you coming in the moonlight. I was like, oh, that's Jacob.
Thicker than a country biscuit.
Thicker than a country biscuit.
Yep.
So we end up just sitting there in that spot and just both listening from there. Because after we talked about it, we're like, well, yeah, maybe there's turkeys right here. We shouldn't go walking in. We were kind of short on time. And it wasn't daylight for long before we heard a hen actually in the pond that you were originally going to be going to. It sounded like she was roosted right on the edge of it, and she flew down, yelped on the ground a little bit, and we're like, okay, cool, there's turkeys in here. Again, we're like pleasantly surprised that we walked right into some more turkeys. Start walking into the woods, and as we're easing up to the woods, I thought I heard drumming. And I'm like listening for it.
Yeah, like we're in palmettos right now.
Yeah, we're in palmettos, and I'm actively trying to listen for drumming because I don't really hear it unless it's the turkey's like right in my face and I know he's right there. Like I have to be really listening for it. I don't just like accidentally pick it up. And so I was already listening for it because I knew there was turkeys in there, and I heard it, and we were sneaking. We were going really slow. I heard it. You were in front of me. And I was like, was that drumming? And we keep going a little bit more, and I hear it again. I'm like, I think that's drumming. And then I heard it a third time, and then I was like, okay, stop. And you turned around and you're like, what? I'm like, I think I hear drumming. And then you turned and you kind of started listening, and you're like, okay, I heard it too. And we were both hearing it at the same time. Because sometimes it can sound like an 18-wheeler downshifting a couple miles away or something, or an airplane. Like there's any low frequency sound.
Yeah.
But we were both hearing it at the same time in the same spot. And we're like, okay, what do we want to do? So rather than set up right in that exact, we actually tried to push up a little bit and get closer, but I was like, I just don't know. We can hear him drumming. He's like close. So we back up like 40 yards back into the pines and set up and call, and he starts just drumming away. Drumming. And we can hear him moving from right to left in front of us.
Yeah, it was like,
boom. Yeah. And I thought he was coming. Dude, I had the gun up, and we had like this perfect little gap, this little pathway coming to us. And like any moment, I was just waiting to see like a head coming through that grass. And he ended up swinging around us. And then it sounded like he was starting to get behind us. And over to our left in that direction is the thicket I had just came through. I was like, he is not in that thicket. There's no way. And so we pull up when we were sitting there after it, like he got behind us, and I'm like, well, he's not coming. I get out my phone and I start looking at Onyx, and I zoom way in on the imagery, and you can see the little opening that we're sitting in, and it has like a real distinct look to it. And then you can see the thicket that I tried to go through, which on the map, it does not look like it would be thick, but it was. And then on the other side of that thicket, there's another opening, like what we're sitting in. I'm like, he swung around us, and he got up in that opening. And I think, did we hear a hen over there with him too? It was just him drumming. So he ended up working through there, and we're like, well, we'll just hang in here with him. So we ease up to where he had just walked through, and it looked so good. It looked so good. It was like a mix of live oaks, palmettos, or cabbage palms, and pine trees. And it was burned. I mean, it wasn't burned this year, but it was burned probably last year. So it was nice and open underneath, but still enough cover where it's not hard to hide the hen. And we sat there till, I don't even know, like 10-something, 10:30, 10:45. And he just never heard him again, never saw him. Never heard another hen, nothing. So, and that's when I saw the snake come crawling by me. I was actually starting to doze off a little bit, and I opened my eyes, and there was a snake sitting like 1 foot.
And Andrew's on the other side of the tree. I did not see a snake this whole trip. Andrew saw 3. Yep. But I always tell people, you don't see them if you don't look for them.
That's true. Well, the first one I saw, I was walking through an area just like where we were that day, and one just came crawling by, black rat snake. The second one I saw, I set up in another spot that looked like that, in a little opening, and I set up, and I sat against the tree, and I got comfortable, and I hadn't even made a call yet. And out of nowhere, this hawk flies in and hits the ground 15 yards in front of me. I mean, right in the middle of the opening. And I'm like, oh my gosh, it got me, because it's like a bird flying in. I'm like, did a turkey just fly in? And so this hawk flies in, hits the ground, and then flies up on a limb, and he had flew down and caught one of those black rat snakes. And I sat there and watched him eat it in the tree, which was super cool. He ate like a quarter of it and then threw it on the ground and flew away.
Mic drop.
Mic drop.
Yeah. But other than that, the only other exciting thing, and I know we're running late on time, was the bird that we tracked through like a burned area. We walked in and again went to another spot to check out. On the way walking in.
Well, one thing about that real quick is this is on the very last day that no, well, the second to last day. We had 2 days left to hunt when you're talking about. So we had started to kind of put together a pattern of where it seemed like the birds wanted to be. Mm-hmm. And one of the main factors was they really like the cypress heads.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
They like to roost in them. And there's also a fresh burn on this area, and it had some cypress heads in it. And this burn was like absolutely barren. Like there was nothing.
Yeah, when we first got there, it was totally black, and by like day 3, it started having green kind of popping up through it. So because that was kind of like what I wanted to do. You asked me like, should we walk in? I'm like, I'd like to walk down the edge of it and to see if there's anything. And we walked in, ended up cutting the biggest set of gobbler tracks I'd seen the whole trip.
Oh, not even close.
I mean, dinosaur looking track.
It's also worth noting, by the way, that we hadn't hunted this burn yet, partly because, one, it was really, really open, and we didn't realize that they were actually in stuff like that. But 2, we didn't see anybody hunting that burn up to that point. Mm-mm. Like that, which is really surprising. Like people were avoiding it for whatever reason. Probably the same reason we were. I mean, you look at it, it's scorched earth, bro. Mm-hmm. There ain't nothing under there except sand and a bunch of little black twigs, little saplings that got burned up. Other than that, it is desolate. There's nothing in there.
Yep.
So we go walking down that fire break on the edge of the burn, and sure enough, dude, that track was impressive. If I found that here, I would be very impressed.
Oh, I'd be super, super excited. So we found this track, and you can see where he'd come out of the burn, hit that logging road, probably strayed there for a second, and then he walked right back to the burn, and they were super fresh. One thing I learned, too, on this trip, when they're in the sand, it's pretty easy to judge how recent that track is. Yeah. Because if it's sharp and crisp, it's probably within a handful of hours, because after that, with the wind and everything, it slowly like erodes out. Like you can see the track, but it's not sharp and crisp. Like you can't see all the details of the track itself.
Yeah.
And it was super fresh. And I was like, we just need to walk through this burn and follow this bird.
Yeah, like fresh enough where we were getting the binoculars out and we were glassing that burn. We're like, he's probably out there right now.
Yeah, and he's walking right towards a cypress head or cypress dome. So we start following him. And we lose him after maybe 150 yards to tracks, but he's going this direction towards the cypress dome head, whatever. We end up working over there, super slow, super quiet, set up on a pine tree, and let's just see if he flies up.
This is in the afternoon,
afternoon. And let's just see if he flies up. And we sat there for probably 30, 40 minutes, and it started getting close to fly up time. And all of a sudden I hear wing flaps or wing beats, and I look over towards the right-hand side of the cypress dome, and I just see this big old freaking turkey flying up into a tree. And I'm like, that's got to be him. Like, dude, that was not a hen. Well, that's one thing we saw. We saw a bunch of hens driving around. But
called up a hen to like 5 yards.
Yeah.
This trip.
But he flew up in the tree, and you had your binos with you. I forgot my binos. I didn't bring them. We were cooking. And you got to see him limb hop a little bit and stand there and kind of strut up in the tree and see,
Yeah, when he first got up in the tree, I had the binos on him, and I was like, "Is that a gobbler? Is it a hen?" And I was watching him, and I thought I could see a beard, but he was like real, like there was just a lot of stuff in front of him. Well, then he limb hopped, and he jumped on a limb, and there was nothing between us except air. And I saw his beard. He went to strut. I saw his red head. I mean, clear as day, I could see him, and which was great. I just couldn't move. Like I was like, I couldn't talk to you because you were like 10 yards behind me. But I was like, do not move.
They had more cover with me.
Oh yeah, you did. Yeah, you were sitting up against all those burned saplings. But I was like, man, I hope Jacob doesn't like shift or whatever back there, because I mean there was nothing between.
You have little faith.
Yeah, well. So he flies up. Don't see another turkey fly up. Just him. He doesn't gobble or anything. I watched him for probably 10 minutes before it got too dark in the binos. And the whole time, he's just looking. He's doing this right here. Like, you could see him. He's just looking all underneath him. And so I was kind of like, there's probably some other turkeys over here somewhere. But we never saw him or heard him or anything. Never gobbled. We let it get nice and dark. And then we get up and we ease out of there super, super quiet. And the plan is, for the next morning, this cypress head has a lot of saplings around the edges of it. This burn has little patches where there'll be thick saplings, and they're burned, but they're still thick saplings. Like, it's still dense, woody cover that a turkey, will walk through, but probably doesn't want to walk through. And we were like, well, he must have flown up. There must be an open patch on the back of that thing. So when we were sitting there, I was looking at some trees that were within 100 or so yards of the edge of that cypress head that were, close to him. And I was marking them on Onyx. I was like, we could sit against that tree. We could sit against that tree. And I'm trying to find the trees on Onyx. I was locating the individual trees because this is like a pine savanna. There is nothing out there. Like any one of these pine trees could fall and not hit another tree in any direction. So there's like zero cover. So I picked the trees on the map. We go back. We're like, we're just going to get right here on one of these trees. When he pitches out in the morning, if he flies back down to the spot he flew up from, he'll probably land in gun range. And it'll be quick. If he doesn't, we'll probably be able to call to him and get him to come over to us. Because when you sit on the ground out there, even though it looks wide open when you're standing up, when you sit on the ground, there's still enough just burned debris that everything's a little bit obstructed. Like they got to get to about 40 yards before they can really see any one specific spot. And so we go in the next morning and we get up in there nice and early. Go by the moonlight. We cut some like little dead saplings and little burned up palmettos out of that burn and brought them in with us and made ourselves little blinds, which we really needed because there was nothing in there. Like absolutely nothing. You set up like, how far were you from me? Like 30 yards?
35 maybe.
30 yards to my left, like kind of covering my back. And then I was facing out in this big opening out in front of us where we thought he might fly down. And it starts getting daylight. And dude, I'm so on edge. I got the gun up, and we don't know if he can see us or not because we're at a different angle than we were the night before. So I'm like, I don't know what all he can see. He might be able to see down here, but you just can't risk it. Like, so I had, since before daylight, I was on the gun. Like, I had the gun up, red dot turned on, like ready to shoot. And it's kind of foggy around that dome. And at very, very first light, where you could just barely start to see all the green shoots coming up across this burn. You could barely see your feet. Mm-hmm. I hear wing beats, and I was like, that must be him limb hopping. And I was thinking, he's probably limb hopping to get back on this side of the tree so he can fly back down into this spot. So now, dude, I'm sitting there, I'm like, oh my gosh, it's about to happen. I'm like, I'm getting a little bit shook up because I'm any moment. And it starts getting more light, and then I see a turkey out of the corner of my eye pitch down out of that cypress dome. And immediately I'm like, oh, that's kind of small. I think that's a hen. And it lands like right in front of you. And I can't even see, when it hits the ground, I can't see it anymore because there's saplings and stuff. But when it lands, I'm like, well, if that's a gobbler, Jacob's about to get it because I knew it landed right in front of you.
Dude, I'm sitting there. And all of a sudden I hear wing beats. I'm like, oh, crap. And I had the gun up. But it was like kind of up on my knee and kind of like right here on my shoulder. But I wasn't on the gun. And I hear wing beats. I'm like, where was that? And I'm like, just moving my eyes. And all of a sudden I just see this turkey, flying right at me. Like, dude, they dive out of these big cypress. And they like catch all this air and they glide. Yep. And it's gliding right at me. I'm like, oh God, because like I can't see from the side profile. It's just seeing that the front part of the turkey, the head and everything, and it just lands. Yeah, like you said, lands right there in front of me, like in some like sapling stuff at like 35 yards. I'm just thinking in my head like, could be the gobbler. Freaking, I took the safety off and everything. I was on the gun, and I'm like, where the heck is it? And I saw it kind of move, and I'm like, looks a little dark. Like one thing we noticed, like the hens look like they stayed out in like a prescribed fire for a little extra long. They're a little roasted.
A little too long.
They're a little dark. And I'm like, man, I think that's a hen. And I'm like looking, and all of a sudden it disappears. And I'm like looking. And probably 5 minutes later, I like just kind of glance over with my eyes kind of at you. And while I'm glancing at you, I'm like, there's a turkey standing right there off Andrew's shoulder at like 30 yards, 25 yards. And I'm like, nah, that's maybe a stump. That's not a turkey. Like, it was kind of through some stuff. I'm like, that's not a turkey. The turkey I'm thinking of is like right here in front of me. And I'm looking. And I kind of look back over and starts walking. I'm like, oh crap, that is the turkey. Because I didn't see another one fly down.
Yeah. So I didn't realize that. So she kind of got past you?
Yeah, like she went through all that thick crap. I couldn't see her. And all of a sudden, I just like looked to the right and she's right there in front of you. And because I'm like dead set looking right here in front of me where I think the bird's going to, come out of. And anyways, there's that hen, she started, kind of milling around, looking back at the tree. And I'm like, this gobbler's still in the tree. Like, he's about to pitch down. Like, this is going to be money. I'm like, please land within 40 yards of where this hen just hit the ground. Yeah. Okay. Because I'm like,
you're already over there picking out your tactics.
Dude, I mean, it's going to be like tactical crossfire. Okay.
Interlocking fields of fire.
What'd you say? It was going to be like a Vietnam ambush?
Oh, it's going to be like Vietnamese ambush.
I mean, dude, just straight cross. Oh, dude. I'm like, this gobbler, he's going to land.
Sam and Blakely are like, what are y'all going to do? Who's going to shoot him? And you were like, well, Andrew's up on the gun because I already missed. I'm like, shoot, we'll just set up and gun him down. Whoever gets a shot gets a shot.
Yeah, well, that's what I'm thinking right now. I'm like, okay, the hen's on the ground. When he flies down, dude, it's going to be just TSS crossfire. Like, he's not walking away from it. And, dude, I'm sitting there. I'm like, I'm now, like, when it got light, before that hen came, I'm like, dude, I need to slouch lower on the tree and, like, really get low because I had stuff around me. I mean, like we said, like, we had some, like, vegetation that we stuck in the ground around us. But I'm like, dude, we are in the open. Okay? That's the way I felt sitting there. So, like, I was, like, crouched down and, dude, guns up. And it went like an hour. It was like 30 minutes later, an hour later. I've been up like that for probably over an hour.
This hen just fed off, by the way.
Yeah, the hen just kind of
walked 12 yards in front of me.
Yeah, and then we heard some more hens kind of yelping, clucking, cutting a little bit in one of those trees.
Yeah, in the dome.
And nothing ever popped up. Nothing ever flew out that we could see. Never heard them. Yeah. And dude, I'm in so much pain right now. It's excruciating. Like, because I still have I fractured my back like 15 years ago, my L5 vertebrae. And if I sit awkward, like, it'll like press on that vertebrae and like, cause it never healed properly. And dude, I get like a shooting pain, like kind of going like down my legs, and also my legs go to sleep. That has already happened. That was 30 minutes ago. Well, I'm sitting there, and the way I was like positioned on the tree, who was it? It was Bob Walker. Talking about always setting up where like that turkey's kind of at a 45-degree angle over your left side if you're a right-handed shooter.
Oh yeah.
Just because it's a little bit easier for you to maneuver. I didn't do that. Should have done that. Thought, hindsight's 20/20. I was more kind of squared up to the bird, and I was sitting there, and I had the gun. My gun is not sitting on my knee; it's kind of off the right side of my left knee, and I'm holding my hand underneath it. And dude, I'm sitting there for so long, dude. My arms are like,
you're just holding up with your arm,
dude. It's like on fire, dude. Like my back hurts, my butt hurts, my legs are asleep, my arms are on fire, dude. I'm like this, dude. I'm sitting there. I'm like, I'm not screwing this opportunity up. Like, it's not happening. Like, I'm not gonna be the one. If he's still up in the tree, I'm not gonna be the one that makes the turkey like leave.
Because this is our last morning.
Yeah, and finally get to the point. Like, I saw you pull your gun down, and I'm like, well, clearly maybe the turkey's not in the tree or something happened.
Well,
so like,
yeah, because I put my gun down because I texted you and I was like, is he still in the tree? Because at this point it's 8 a.m. It's been daylight for a long time.
Yeah,
and I'm like, there's no freaking way he's still up in that tree right now. And so I texted you because I'm like, well, maybe Jacob's got a better angle because you were about 30 yards behind me and maybe like 10 yards off to my left. And I'm like, maybe he can see something that I can't see. And you texted me and you said that you had seen some shapes or some movement up in the trees, which I had seen too. Like, I had seen something in one of those cypress trees. Mm-hmm. And I couldn't tell what it was because of all the fog, and I wasn't going to try to get my binos or whatever. And I was like, well, maybe he is up there. So I was like, I'm just going to risk it and move real slow. So I move super slow, put my gun down, ease my hand down, pick up my binoculars, and I just start picking apart this cypress dome. I mean, I'm looking at everything in there. And I glass it for a solid 10 minutes. And I don't see anything. I don't see any movement. I don't see a redhead. I don't see wing feathers. Like, I'm looking for a piece of a turkey, like, through the trees. I see absolutely nothing. I'm like, he's not up there. I'm pretty sure he's not up there. And so then I'm like, crap. First of all, where did he go? Second of all, how long ago did he fly out? Because my fear with this spot, one thing we were talking about the night before was, I'm like, if he gets on the ground, he's going to be kind of hard to kill because he can go anywhere in that burn. And there's like no cover for us except in that one spot. And so if we don't kill him right on the fly down, we should call to him as soon as he hits the ground and just get him to see if he'll come right to us when he's trying to get on that first 10 in the morning. And we totally missed that opportunity. And so we call, or I get out my ceramic call, and I start clucking and purring and doing some real soft yelps. And I'm in the middle of the sequence, and I look off to my right, off across the burn, and I see like movement over there. And I was like, was that a coon? Because it looked kind of silver.
Yeah, that's what I saw.
And I was like, was it a coon or a turkey? And I finished the calling sequence, and I just set the call down, and I'm like looking. And then I see it go between two trees. I'm like, I'm pretty sure that's a turkey. And then I see the head come up. I'm like, oh yeah, it's a turkey. I can immediately see it's a hen. So I'm like, okay, well, here comes a hen. Cool. And then I see another turkey behind it, and I can't tell what it is. So I'm like, okay, so it's now I'm thinking, well, maybe the cypress dome is on my left, and these turkeys are coming from my right. And I'm like, well, maybe he flew out the back side with that hen that we heard, because there's another hen, not the one that flew down and walked right in front of us, but there was another one back there. I was like, maybe they flew out the back side and they're swinging around to us. So I kind of get turned, because they're hard right for me. I get turned when they're behind some stuff. Get my gun up, and they're just coming right at us now. So I'm like, okay, let's see what this is. And they get maybe 75 yards out, and I can start seeing that the second one is definitely a male turkey. I can see little bits of red through the brush, and as he's walking, I thought, all those little black shoots I was talking about? Mm-hmm. I thought I saw a beard. I mean, I really did think that I saw a beard. And it was just one of those saplings, I guess. But he comes out, and they're behind these bushes, and I see him raise his head up behind that bush, and it's just like old red head straight up in the air. He's like 50 yards. I'm like, click the safety off. I'm about to shoot him, and the hen swings around and gets right between me and him. So I'm like, okay, I just won't shoot him yet. But I'm like, I'm good, because this hen is walking straight to me still. She's like 10 yards ahead of him. I'm like, he's coming right here. She keeps coming, and he steps out from behind the bush, and there is no beard to be seen whatsoever. It was a Jake, and his beard was so small that it looked like his feathers were just ruffled on his chest. I mean, there was zero. You see some of those Jakes that have like a 3 or 4 inch beard, like kind of pokes out. Dude, there was like nothing there. Like, he didn't even look like a Jake.
Beard rot.
Well, so that's what I was wondering, because I've talked to people who have killed some Osceolas with beard rot, and that's just where the adult gobbler's beard literally falls off, essentially, or at least part of it does. So he's got like, you'll see one that's got like a 2-inch beard, but he's a mature bird. He's got a full fan. He's got spurs, and so I'm like, maybe he's that. So I'm like, please strut, because I just want to see, like, if he went into strut and there was a full tail fan, he would have, it would have been bad. He wouldn't strut. He was just following this hen around. They walk into 12 yards from me. They are right in front of me. And I'm like, I'm on the gun, and I'm literally like looking over the gun like this, and I'm looking at his legs, trying to see if I can see spurs. And I can see him, like, there's just nubs. He's like Jake. And he was about the same size as her. Like, they both look pretty small. So I let him walk on by. And he walks the opposite direction the first hen walked. So he's coming from my right, going to my left. So now he's about to walk in front of you. So I was like, I wonder if Jacob's going to shoot him.
You texted me. And you're like, shoot the Jake. And by the way, the whole time this is happening, I'm thinking it's a long beard because I see the head and everything. Yeah. And I'm filming on my phone. I'm like, I'm off your shoulder, 30 yards from you. And I'm like, this is going to be some sweet footage. Like, I hope he just freaking hammers his bird. And then finally, like, ears on the gun the whole time. I'm like, it's got to be a Jake. And I'm like, looking, I'm like, oh yeah, he don't have a beard. And then I get a text message from you after they walk by you, and you're like, shoot the Jake. I'm like, I'm not shooting the Jake. Then he comes through that sapling stuff in front of me, and at one point he raises his head up above it and like kind of looks around. I'm like, this would be the time to shoot a Jake. He's doing everything right, but I was like, no, I'm not going to shoot a Jake. I'm like, I already passed like 7 of or 8 of 10 of them now.
Well, the guy at the little check station thing, he was like, if you boys call up a Jake this week, you better shoot it. Because he's like, it's hard out here. You better take what you can get.
Yep.
And, when he was standing there at 12 yards, I mean, he literally stood there for, I don't know, several minutes right in front of me. And he had 2 hens with him. And, there was a couple times where I flipped that safety off again. I was like, you're testing my patience here, buddy. But, I was like, I just didn't want to shoot a Jake. Nothing wrong with shooting a Jake, as long as it's legal where you live. I don't really have any problem with anybody shooting a Jake. For me, I'd be like, that's not what I came down there for. I would have been kind of disappointed shooting a Jake.
Yeah.
So just let him walk on by. And I'm like, that big bird's still around here somewhere. I don't want to blast this sucker.
Well, that's why I was kind of hoping you would kill him, so then I could just focus killing the big bird. That was my game plan. I was like, please shoot the Jake. Please shoot the Jake.
I was thinking this. I was like, Jacob, shoot it so we can draw blood. Because I'm like, we're probably not going to kill this other bird.
No.
But let's try it. So, dude, we sat out there in that burn, and we make a couple of adjustments and move around after a while. And I sat in that. We went and made one sit, and then came back to our original spot. And by now, it's getting close to lunchtime. When we came back to that spot where we had all the action that morning, there's another hen standing there when we walk up. Mm-hmm. And I was like, they clearly want to be here, so we should just set this. And I think you didn't really want to sit it, so I gave you my bino harness, and you were like, I'm just going to go over here and glass and see if I can see some birds working across. So I went and got against the same tree I was on that morning, and I sat there until like 1:30, roasting in the sun. I'm talking about roasting. Full sun, zero shade.
Everything's black around you, so it's like
everything is
absorbing all that sun radiation heat, and you're just like cooking there, rotisserie style.
Yeah, it was rough. It was pretty nasty.
And
I didn't have any more turkeys.
Yeah, I didn't see anything either. Saw a gopher tortoise. That was it. I was trying to film them. Those suckers are skittish. He was digging out like where their little holes. And anyway, but no,
where all the dang snakes are up in those holes.
Yeah, but other than that, I didn't see anything else, and that kind of wrapped it up. Next morning, we had to kind of head on back.
Well, that evening, we did go back into that area that evening, and we were going to hunt that spot. So we're like, well, if we didn't kill him this morning...
Oh, that was a really good point. I forgot about that, yeah.
We'll kill him this afternoon, or kill a bird this afternoon, because there were so many tracks around that cypress dome, and there's so many tracks around that burn, that I'm like, they just have to... And there were so many turkeys in there. We had the hen fly down. We had... the Jake come by with the two hens, and then we had another hen that came by in there. So, I mean, I was like, they want to be in this spot. Which, by the way, the gobbler is MIA. We don't know what happened to the gobbler. Like, this is not a big cypress dome either. So, like, we just have no idea where he could have even gone until that afternoon. So we go walk into that spot, and we're walking up, all excited, gonna go kill a turkey this afternoon. I was very confident. I was like, something's going to come by here. Mm-hmm. We get like, I don't know, 175, 200 yards from where we were going to sit. And again, there's all those burned saplings. I was like, hey, we should probably cut some more cover, like to brush back in. Mm-hmm. Just because there's not very much cover in there. So you go and you start cutting some saplings, and I'm just standing there waiting. And I'm looking down the trail towards where we're going, and then a shot rings out. Right there. Mm-hmm. And I was like, oh my God. And I see a dude stand up out of all those saplings. And he like stands up and he's looking, and then he aims his gun again, and then he brings his gun down and he just stands there, and then he slowly walks in that direction. I'm like, well, he just missed whatever he was shooting at probably. So he walks over there, and you come walking back up the trail, and you got this confused look on your face. Like you thought it was me that shot.
Yeah, I thought it was you that shot, but then again, the shot sounded weird. I mean, it was a shotgun, but like I could hear the pellets going through stuff.
Yeah.
Like I heard the shot, and I could hear like the tinging of pellets. And I'm like, did you just kill one walking? I mean, I literally thought it was you. And I walked up, and I saw you on your binos, so I was like, that's why I was so confused. I'm like, well, and you're like, there's a guy that just shot. I'm like, what? And I looked up and I see the dude walking around in camo. I'm like, you're kidding me, dude.
Yeah, dude, I couldn't believe it. So I was gonna walk up there and talk to the guy, because when he shot, I'm like, he came walking back and he didn't have a turkey. I'm like, okay, yeah, he missed. And he sat back down in his chair, and then I could see him, and he was like aiming again. And I bet you what he did is he just freaking splintered a bunch of saplings right in front of him. Mm-hmm. Because where he was sitting, he wasn't sitting up against those big pine trees that me and you were.
He was sitting out in the burn.
He was sitting out in the burn.
Like how you would dove hunt.
Right in the middle of those saplings. And, like, those saplings are dense. When you sit on the ground, there's a bunch of them. And, like, you cannot shoot through that. Even my gun, I couldn't shoot through that. And I think that's what he did. Like, you could hear, like you said, you could hear it hitting. Well, he sat back down, and I was waiting for him to stand back up and start walking around again. And he just never did. We stood there for a couple minutes, and he went right back to hunting. And we were like, oh, crap. So, got beat to our spot.
Yep.
Guy missed a bird. Who knows what it was? It's probably that Jake, honestly.
Yep. But
so then we loop around, and we go back to the original roadbed that we found that gobbler's tracks on. And we're just, at this point, kind of last-ditch effort last afternoon. And we walk over there, and lo and behold, what we find old Big Boys tracks.
Yeah.
Those same big giant tracks.
From that morning.
Yep, from that morning, 100% from that morning. And what the only thing I can think of is that there was 2 times he could have flown down where we didn't really see him. Either the early wing beat where it was almost dark still and foggy, he could have flown down, maybe not right where that hen landed, but like 20 or 30 yards to the left of that. So even it would have been hard for you to see him too. And it was dark and foggy. So I bet you that's probably when he flew down, and then he went straight in that direction where we found the tracks. It was either that or later in the morning after the first hen flew down, I thought I saw a turkey going through the trees of that cypress dome, but it looked like it landed right on the edge of that cypress dome. And I walked over there later in the day, and it was so thick, I'm like, no, I don't think a turkey landed right here. So I don't even know what that was. It could have been just some other bird or whatever, because I was seeing it out of the corner of my eye. But I bet you that's what it was, dude. I bet that very first wing beat was him flying down and just booking it across that burn and getting out of there. And that's the other thing too. That first hen that flew down, she was sitting there and she turned around and was like looking back up at the cypress dome the whole time. I mean, she was like staring at it. I was like, well, he must be up there, and she's looking at him. Mm-hmm. I don't know.
Anyway, Florida was a good time. I enjoyed it. Had to may try to do it again next year. Try to see if we could revenge ourselves, but did not kill anything. So,
should have
killed one opening for not opening one first day we were there. But other than that, you got anything else?
No, not that. Run that push button for us again.
So again, this is made by Mike Lapp from Pennsylvania. It's one of his custom push buttons. So I already kind of clucked on it earlier, but I'll cluck on it and then yelp on it.
Do the calling sequence that you called in all those birds with, Longbeard. Hold it closer to the microphone.
It's kind of hard to do it holding like that. It's easier. You kind of almost you can actually muffle it because the sound chamber, everything comes out of the top of it, and you can hold it down towards the ground or to your leg.
Oh, wow.
Or you can put it behind you and run it. But anyway, yeah, I've got to practice more on like the control to be able to, like, if you hear Greg Mayhair from Meadow Creek run it, it is unreal. But he's done it so much that he's got like the tension and everything down to like be able to run it like super effectively. But it's It's really cool. It's super lightweight too and fits in my vest pretty easily. But really like that little thing.
Yeah, that's a really good option if you're newer to turkey calling. Like I mentioned earlier, I was trying to teach Sam and Blakely how to run a pot call, which they could do it a little bit before, but they didn't have enough control over everything, and that something like that push button would be great for them. But what I was showing them, I was like, if you can cluck and you can yelp, you can kill a turkey. And so we just went over the basics of how to do that. Yeah, show us what you're doing. That's ceramic.
Dude, I was calling like pretty much at that volume. Really quiet.
Well, and see, like earlier in the podcast when we're talking about you don't have to be great at calling, like I'm not saying that sounds bad. I'm just saying that's not like a fancy thing that you hear somebody do on a calling stage or even on YouTube, where a lot of these guys on YouTube, like Dave Owens just won the Grand National Calling Championship. Like he's a really good turkey caller, and they do a lot of technical things that you just don't have to do. Just that quiet, simple little yelp. Most people can pick up a pot call and make that sound within, half an hour of playing with it, if that. I had Sam, like especially clucks too, because Sam, like he could not cluck on this pot call because of how he was trying to do it. Like he wasn't using the striker where you kind of like pop it.
Man, Sam's going to say something else about this. You never say anything positive about Sam.
Look,
Sam, I'm on your side, my man.
Say something positive. Okay, he couldn't do it at first. It took him maybe 10 minutes, and he was clucking as good as I was. Mm-hmm. And literally, he would cluck and I would cluck. I'm like, sounds exactly the same. So that's why I like pot calls. They're just easy. But I was trying to tell them, I'm like, don't worry about purrs. Don't worry about like kikis. Don't worry about Jake yelps. Don't worry about anything except clucks and yelps right now.
Yeah.
You know, and then you can do cuts as well. If you can do a cluck, you can do a cut. Mm-hmm. So I just showed them the basics of that, and then, you know, all you need to do is cluck 4 or 5 times, yelp 4 or 5 times, and then set it down and wait for a while. Mm-hmm. You know, and as you get better at calling, you can do more things, and you have like more leeway to play with. Mm-hmm. But I mean, outside of, you know, I mean, when it just comes to just getting started and killing turkeys, like you don't need anything more than that.
Yeah, no, not at all. Sweet. Well, appreciate y'all watching the podcast. Thank y'all for listening. Go write in some, well, I almost said reviews. Actually, yeah, if you listen to the podcast on Apple Podcasts, go leave us a new review if you don't mind, especially if you like the turkey content. If you like some of the past turkey episodes we've been doing, go leave us a 5-star written review on Apple Podcasts. We really greatly appreciate those. And again, write in your Q&As, especially turkey Q&As for the next few weeks so we can kind of get to answering some of those as season's getting underway for a lot of us in the Southeast. But appreciate y'all watching the podcast. Thank y'all for listening. We'll catch you back here on the next episode from the Southern Outdoorsman. And remember, guys, y'all stay Southern.